The NFL has seen some of the most iconic celebrations in the history of the sport. In fact, celebrations in the NFL have never been a bigger part of the league than they are today. Whether it's a sack, a defensive takeaway, or a touchdown, the celebrations that we see from today's NFL players can seem a bit too much, or maybe even a little over the top or corny, but they can also be a lot of fun when they're done right. Although we see modern players celebrating more often, their celebrations don't have the same originality or surprise factor as before. Wouldn't you agree? So, when we have to take a look at some of the most iconic ones, we will take a look at some of the best from recent years, as well as some of the funniest classics that NFL fans fell in love with. Be it choreographed group celebrations, some exciting and fun solos, classics players did every time they made a play. Here's taking a look at some of the best and most iconic celebrations in NFL history. So let's jump right into it, shall we? Odell Beckham's smooth dance moves. There is no doubt about the fact that Miami Dolphins wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. is one of the more entertaining players who is still making plays on Sundays, carrying the torch for the Smiths, the Owens, as well as the Ochocinco's of the days gone by. But not just that. Beckham Jr. has got real dancing skills too that have for long impressed NFL fans who watch him play. Even though his celebrations can change from time to time, and those dance moves can surprise you every time, the fact they are always executed to perfection makes him look even more badass. Some of his best performances are homages, like his Carlton dance, his Ray Lewis dance, his Michael Jackson moonwalk, his Thriller dance, his LeBron chalk toss, and dozens more. He's got swag in his pocket like nobody else, and the NFL world certainly hopes he can find the end zone a few more times to show us what else he's got before calling it quits. Every time Beckham Jr. makes a touchdown, the world awaits another dance move from him, and it would be fun to see what he has in store for the NFL world the next time he makes a touchdown. Mark Gastineau's sack celebration. Who better than the originator of the sack celebration or sack dance himself? None other than Mark Gastineau. You can't have a list without Mark Gastineau. Most people didn't love him, but he did pretty much start the whole sack dance thing. He happened to be the first person to have a signature celebration when he got a sack, and that celebration was going absolutely crazy and pumping his fists like he had just achieved the greatest thing to ever be accomplished in the NFL. The celebration was so iconic yet controversial at the same time that it resulted in a bench-clearing brawl against the Los Angeles Rams in 1983. Gastineau and his mullet danced a lot too, tallying 107.5 sacks in his career, leading the league in both 1983 and 1984. Randy Moss shooting the moon at Lambeau. Remember when the Minnesota Vikings All-Pro wideout Randy Moss scored his second touchdown of the game against his team's bitter rivals, the Packers? It happened to be in a wild card playoff game, which was preceded by him pretending to moon their overly rowdy fans. It is undoubtedly one of the most hilarious and iconic celebrations of all time, even though it did lack some decorum. And you know what was even better? The hilarious and iconic reaction of the commentator, Joe Buck, who said, "That is a disgusting act by Randy Moss," and the line was the cherry on top. Now the celebration might have been so controversial that it urged the team to trade Moss following the season after 8 seasons in the Twin Cities, but I guess we'll never know if it was really the main reason. Steve Smith's Love Boat, among others. When we talk about touchdown celebrations, why do we not talk enough about Steve Smith? The guy is often the forgotten man when it comes to elite touchdown celebrators, but that's not how it should be. He scored a ton of them, 81 to be precise, and he was always witty and clever with the choices he made for celebrating. Be it fencing against the Bucks or wiping the football's butt like it was a baby, Smith was always ready with an energetic dance that entertained the crowd. But do you know his most iconic touchdown celebration? It definitely has to be his rowboat celebration against a Vikings team that had been going through an ugly and highly publicized love boat type scandal earlier that week. The perfect way to piss off the opposition, right? LeRoy Butler's Lambeau Leap. Now we all know that Lambeau Field is one of the most preserved, historic, and storied stadiums in NFL history. And what added to its rich history and fame was when in 1993, LeRoy Butler made the first Lambeau Leap by jumping into the stands after scoring a touchdown. Ever since that celebration, it has become something of a ritual of passage for Green Bay Packers players. And not just them, but for other teams in other stadiums that regularly imitate the Lambeau Leap, though they don't have the same history or a name that is more iconic than this one. What makes the celebration one of the greatest? Well, the fact that it's a nice, simple celebration that highlights the connection between fans and the players makes it even more special and heartwarming. Wouldn't you agree? Primetime's Shuffle. How can we go on about this list without mentioning the celebration of arguably the greatest cornerback of all time in the NFL? None other than Deion Sanders, who was just as good on the field as he was off of it. While being an elite athlete, Sanders was also one of the greatest entertainers on the field. His ability to return punts, kicks, and interceptions to the house allowed Neon Deion, as he was popularly called, to break out the Deion Shuffle, which is one of the best original arrangements we have ever seen in NFL history. As soon as Sanders got into the clear, the audience would catch their breath and count on a whole lot of showmanship as he high-stepped the final 10-15 yards with his hand behind his head, before jumping into his signature move once he hit pay dirt. And mind you, this was performed by him with style every single time. Although many try to replicate it, the celebration is still not pulled off by many. But when someone gets it right and does it well, it's always fun to see. But nobody does it like Sanders. Billy Johnson's Funky Chicken. Do you know about the originator of the touchdown dance? Who was he? And why was he a trendsetter ahead of his time? If you don't know who we are talking about, it's none other than Billy White Shoes Johnson. Billy was one of the first guys to actually celebrate touchdowns with a consistent routine that entertained the world every single time. Johnson was one of the greatest return men of all time, and that very reason also provided him with the opportunity to show off his signature Funky Chicken dance, which became iconic very soon. The routine consisted of bouncing his legs in and out akimbo, dropping into the splits, pretending to launch the football, faking you out, and dropping it into the hand behind his back. It was really something else during the 1970s, and it's still fun to watch to this day. Joe Horn makes a call to God. This has got to be one of the most unexpected, shocking, and of course, one of the most iconic celebrations in the history of the NFL. And we are talking about the time when four-time Pro Bowler Joe Horn made a phone call to God in front of the world. Right before a nationally televised SNF game for the New Orleans Saints in 2003, Joe Horn stuffed a cell phone underneath the goalpost, and after scoring his second TD of the night, he popped the phone out and took a call in the middle of the game. Could a celebration be any more iconic? The NFL world was in for a shock seeing Horn do this and did not expect this sort of celebration for him. And what was so special about the celebration? Along with it being unexpected, cocky, hilarious, and costly, Horn was fined $30K for the iconic stunt. The planning and the execution were just perfect, and Horn got full marks for these two factors. And obviously, we were going to see people replicate this celebration later on as well. But even Michael Thomas's attempt at recreating it could ruin its distinct texture. Not to mention that he pulled this stunt after his second of 4 touchdowns on that day. One thing is certain, we might not see such an iconic celebration for a very long time. Chad Johnson's weekly skit. It would be a shame and disrespectful to not bring Chad Johnson, aka Chad Ochocinco, aka Chad Ochocinco Johnson, to this list. And while the competition for the top spot on this list was tough, we have decided to go with Johnson for the second spot. Now you can play any of Johnson's highlights over the course of an afternoon, of his famous and entertaining antics over the years in the NFL, and you would not be able to help but get amused and LOL at his celebrations. How crazy would a guy need to be to legally change his name in 2008 so they would have to allow him to put Ochocinco on his jersey? If that isn't crazy, we don't know what is. And by the way, Ochocinco might just even top other showmen in the world, because he is undoubtedly the greatest showman in NFL history. There are just so many TD celebrations of his that it would be impossible to choose just one that is our favorite. His proposal to a cheerleader, his exquisite river dance, his 20 Hall of Fame jacket, his end zone pylon putt, his revival of the football in the end zone. The list is long. Even though as a 4-time All-Pro wide receiver, his authenticity and creativity as an end zone showman could not be matched by others. Terrell Owens' bag of tricks. And of course, topping this list is none other than Terrell Owens and his celebrations whenever he finds the end zone in a game. We think there cannot be anyone more entertaining than him when it comes to touchdown celebrations in the history of the NFL. The big wideout is a surefire Hall of Famer and a top 5 wide receiver all time. And as if these accolades were not enough, he stole the limelight when it came to celebrations as well. What were some of his most iconic celebrations? Well, let's see. He grabbed some pom-poms and danced with the cheerleaders. He imitated Ray Lewis against the Ravens, and he served the ball as a meal. He mimed, he danced, and he screamed his favorite catchphrases without hesitation. Not just this, some of his go-to celebrations and catchphrases were, "I love me some me," and "Get your popcorn ready." In fact, he was so passionate about the latter that he tossed some popcorn into his face mask during one game. During another, he scored a touchdown and proceeded to reveal a Sharpie he had stashed in his sock, which he used to sign the football before tossing it into the stands. But which was his most infamous and iconic celebration, you might ask? Oh, that has to be the time when he celebrated on the Cowboys logo at midfield and received a chorus of boos.
I don't blame Teague for doing that.
but shamelessly did it again later in the game, only to get pulled up by George Teague for his actions later on. As controversial as he was one of the greatest players and a top-level athlete, with entertaining skills that made him a legend of the sport. So here were the best and most iconic NFL celebrations of all time. Which one is your favorite? Let us know in the comments section below.